Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Talk to Me. This is a very tight, gothic horror film. And it's sort of like a gothic ghost tale in a lot of ways. You probably heard a little bit of buzz about this film, and it is sort of the big A24 horror movie of the moment. But I think justifiably so. Now, this is actually directed by two YouTubers, and I know we've had films like, Skinamarink recently from the liminal, kind of the weirder subgenre in YouTube, or you had Mama, that film, who started from a short film. There's lots of people who start with short films on the internet. That's totally not a new thing necessarily. These two, the directors, Dan and Michael Filippo, are actually more known as their YouTube channel called Rackaracka, and their most known things are like Marvel vs. DC, where a bunch of their friends are like Marvel and DC characters and they fight and tell jokes, or Harry Potter verse whatever the fuck. Very much in the epic rap battle vein of YouTube, or like I could say they know KSI and Jake Paul and stuff from the few of their videos I watched, and make pretty traditional kind of thumbnail sort of things. And meaning it's super strange that they made a movie this good and this much like a classic horror film. They're not the traditional way, and I think there's nothing they've made before this that would indicate that this would be this good, and A24 would want to work with them and all those things. But fuck that, because this movie is great, so I don't really care. All those things like auteur theory or looking through someone's artistic past or something, or their filmography, can work for you, but sometimes you gotta say, fuck it, this movie's good, I don't care. I don't care if, Harry Potter versus Star Wars guy went on to make a great movie. He did, and I think we all knew one of those guys would go on to do something, and they're the ones to do it. There's also another fun fact about this movie. The concept was done by Daley Pearson, who did those like funny Thor's roommate bits, and he also is a producer on Bluey, and the concept of this was came up by him, which is really like no one involved in this movie at all has done really horror stuff, and which makes it extra odd, because usually you can't just like sort of dip into horror. It's not one of those genres that often works well with. So this movie is kind of shocking, almost where like these guys, okay. I mean, it's just cool that all these people made a great horror movie, but it's interesting. However, I think a lot of what this film does is it's patient, it's smart, and it's telling kind of as a great horror film does, telling like kind of a ghostly tale. And almost, I would say, unlike most, I think, people who want to give you all the information, it's interesting how much they are not telling you and playing with that ambiguity. I don't think ambiguity is something a lot of creative people nowadays really think about. I know I complain about like we almost get too much information that almost doesn't work, and this film plays with it, and sometimes you can be like, I think you're going a little far with this, but overall it definitely works. Now, Talk to Me is actually a great concept, by the way, and I also have to say I came into this movie very cold. I was just like, people are talking about it. I try to go to the movies once a week. I thought, why not? And then I got my ticket, and I go, oh, I should like actually watch a trailer for this, and then I did. And so most of the big summer movies where I'd seen their trailers a few times, watching movies or online or clips online or TV or whatever, this I really just saw because I knew some friends who were into it, and I was like, okay, why not? And it actually decently surprised me, and I definitely really liked it. It was kind of fun going into a movie cold. However, the concept of this, is basically there is a hand, a ceramic kind of hand. These kids have it, and they kind of use it as a party game while they like get drunk and smoke weed and stuff like that. Mia, who's played by Sophie Wilde, hangs out with Jade, who also has her brother Riley. She hangs out at their house all the time. She kind of has, her mother died a few years ago. She hangs out there. Her mom, who's played by Miranda Otto, you'd know from killing Sauron in Lord of the Rings and stuff, or the guy in that. I don't know, she kills Sauron. She kills no man can kill me or something, whatever. She kills somebody, I forget. It was a big thing. You remember it. They're sort of the main characters, and they saw this like hand, and what happens is you touch the hand and you say, talk to me, and then suddenly a ghost appears right in front of you, just like how you, camera, or people watching through camera are looking at me. Then you say, I think you say, and then let you can come in, or let me in, or something like that. And then they sort of possess you. You only do it for 90 seconds. Why, I don't know, and how they came up with it, I don't know, but they all just do that. And so after 90 seconds, you blow out a candle, which you would have lit, and if I was smarter, I would have said at the beginning, and then you blow it out. And of course, obviously, because you're fucking with ghosts, shit happens and goes wrong after Mia is contacted by her mom, or so she thinks, and through one of the kids, and has that kid hold on too long, and complications arise. One of the smart things about horror, and going back for Carpenter's Halloween and what Deborah Hill did with that screenplay, as well as John Carpenter, but I think Deborah Hill is the reason, is give you a thing about teenagers that's entirely super universal, but not specific. Like, don't do fucking reefer madness. You don't need to have people get stabbed if they have sex. That's too much almost. But if you have it where it is an emotion, a feeling, like they're babysitting and the house is weird and you're not sure and stuff like that, or they're just hanging out driving the car and her dad shows up, shit like that. But in this hand, as they're playing with it, which it shouldn't be, if you're ever hanging out with like some weird ghost shit, like I'm not doing that one. But it kind of shows you one of the things about youth is you see as you're young, you sort of take something too far, whether it's you think you can drink and drive, whether it's drugs, whether it's just doing stupid shit, and somebody dies or breaks their arm or something like that. And we all have either stories or friends that's happened to and things. And I think this takes this ghost thing and uses that idea of teens doing something that normal teens would do and taking it too far, and in this case, destroying someone through ghostly possession. And it works so well in that I wholly believed that the way they did it would happen. Now, obviously, there's things where, like, the character of Mia is wanting to see her mother, and the ghosts obviously take advantage of that. But I think it also shows that how long you would push these certain things, how you would, play around with these certain things. It shows, like, the complications of, yeah, sure, maybe there's a reason you did this or that. But ultimately, like, those are the kind of risks you would take as a young person. And I think that really actually works in this. I also think, the directors, the Filippo brothers or something, are really very absolutely great at directing this. I think they really have a real patience to it. They're really good at using iconography. Particularly, I thought it was a kangaroo. I've heard other people say it's a willoughby. I'm not a zoologist, so it's an animal who's hurt on the side of the road early on in the film that plays into character motivations later. There's nothing at the beginning that's just a wasted moment. It might feel a little off and odd, and they definitely play on, this almost feels like they are consciously fucking with the A24 thing. It's interesting because the other directors who do A24 stuff or distributed by A24, isn't really an A24 style as much as people seem to think there is for some reason. I'm not sure why. This seems to sort of play with the art horror and kind of use that kind of ambiguity to the film's advantage, which I think I really liked. And you end up seeing it as like kind of character beats. It's a very tight, smart kind of horror film, and I think it is one of mainstream-wise one of the better horror films. I still am a little more partial to Skinamarink, much like when I talk about every animated film. I'm like, hey, it's not Spider-Verse. The Skinamarink is that for me with horror movies this year. But that's a weird oddity. I think this is, for your normal people, because there were people who I didn't expect to see movies like this, and I don't think it was like necessarily like pushing their buttons and pushing them in places, much like an Ari Aster would or something like that. This, I think, is going more towards mainstream horror film, but kind of doing the art horror at the same time, which is actually kind of interesting. I haven't seen anyone do that quite as well, and it's very hard to do mainstream and art cinema at the same time. I feel like I see more disasters and bad movies that, like, not even like disaster bad movies, just like movies that I'm just like, I'm so fucking bored, this sucks. And like that almost is the hardest line to do, and they're able to do it very well. And I think there is a foreboding feeling of this, like, you don't really know what's out there. Are they tricking you? What is your perception of things? What is your perception of reality? If a other spirit can control reality, do you even know what reality fully is? Which I think is an undercurrent of this. You can almost not see that throughout this film, which I actually really like that about it. It didn't occur to me, maybe even towards the end, that they're like these villains and even the people doing this are being played with. I think the performance of Sophie Wilde as Mia is actually really great. I think it is one of the best horror protagonist performances I've seen in a long time. I think she could be a big star. She was really great and sold this movie. I think at first it reminded me of just, you know, she's very good and stuff, but almost the hauntedness of it reminded me a bit of Carnival of Souls. I gotta say, I don't know if she's even seen that or the directors have, but it definitely reminded me of that kind of thing. Like, you felt like the ghosts were calling to her as much as she was kind of calling out to maybe see her mother in kind of even the way she, like, just the naturalness of her, but almost like her patience, her humility in it as well, I think really draws you in a way. It's like she's a very complicated, conflicted character, but at the same time, I think someone who, you know, the morals of going on throughout it, which also, like, the fact that directors can get you to understand that as an audience, I really, if we're calling the Philippo brothers, if I'm being serious, I guess the Philippo brothers is their graphic novel name, but Rackaracka is their comic book name. I don't know, I really quite like this one. I think it's just a simple, down the line horror film that has larger ambitions within that. It's done as a great genre director would, because they're saying a lot more with this genre and through this genre, almost as like a really good studio director used to do. But I think it's more genre in terms of horror and how that genre almost works, if any of that sounded like it made sense. But I do really like this film, and I think it really had me going like, a lot. They do a lot of creepy stuff, and I think I've seen the few time I'm really unfamiliar with their YouTube channel, because I definitely know what it's like to have a popular one. So when they mess with horror, I think they mess with the mood of it, and they play with the idea you don't know what's going on and what could like pop out around the corner, and like a good kind of spook kind of show would. And that I really like, because I think horror is in a really great place right now, way better than I think any of us could imagine. And yeah, I do have some cynical ideas about the fact that like A24 has popped out another surprise horror franchise with this. They're going to make like a prequel movie and stuff. I don't love that, but I'm not going to penalize this movie for that. I'm like, I mean, you know, I don't mind, because these all cost like $4 million and you're not going too crazy, and like, as long as they're good. But at the same point, I'm not going to judge this film on A24's business plan. I will judge this film on what it is. And I think what it is just like fucking excellent. It's just an excellent kind of tight horror film. And the more I think about it, the more it haunts me, the more I can remember things about it. It's a very memorable kind of movie. And I think that's one of the things I really like about this school of horror filmmakers is they seem to really love horror, but they also seem to really love the movies. And more so than I see from blockbuster cinema anymore, more so than I see from a lot of people, unless you're doing something sort of odd and different, it feels like they love getting to play with this genre and with filmmaking, and you know, almost like this is, I thought, was a mix between the art film horror. I'm not saying The Thing. I'm not saying elevated horror, because that's dumb, but it's like that and James Wan and his horror stuff, and we're not going Malignant kind of stuff, although that does these things too. But like, James Wan plays with the audience. He is an audience friendly director. Like, he wants to hear reactions from you, and this film definitely does. And that's why, like, I was surprised when there was a mainstream audience there. I was a little worried. I was like, oh, is this going to be a rough watch? Because I've seen A24 stuff, and usually it works out, but you can tell when people are moving in their seats a lot. And that was not what was going on. It really grabbed their attention. It's also like the idea of just the randomness of like, oh my God, you reach out to this hand and what ghost is going to come? And these kids like just keep playing this like literally like playing Russian roulette with their souls and with their mind. And you're like letting people possess you. Like, oh my God. I was just like, I also like seeing Miranda Otto. That was great. I like all the kids, Alexandra Jensen, Joe Bird, I think also kind of we're not hearing enough about, but I thought did a great job. Everyone, including Zoe Tarakis, who plays Haley, who the second time this year we've had someone, a trans person, be in a horror film. They never even mention it. It's not a big deal. And I think that's actually pretty cool. I thought he was actually really great in this movie. Like really like him and his friend, I think it's Joss or Chris Alessano, I think. They gave off that vibe of like, if you ever had those friends who had like the good weed or the great bong, you're like, oh, they're here, and then you knew everyone was getting fucked up. That was the vibe they gave off. I was like, very relatable to me from high school. And you're like, oh, here we go, and they're like, are you guys ready for this? And it's like they definitely gave off that, especially because it was wrapped in the way it was wrapped up. I definitely remember people bringing out like the crazy bong that way. I think this film gets into the consequences of youth and all that, but I think also the way it plays on you and the way it makes me thinking about the plot and thinking about the many possibilities within it, but as well as just doing a great gothic ghost tale. And ultimately, when we look at these horror films and we talk about like how it scares us and freaks us out and all those things, if you're able to tell like an almost complete story the way this does, in this kind of spooky ghost tale the way it is, influenced by horror, influenced by all these things, you have to know all of this stuff to work in. And I think what I really actually love about this current generation of filmmakers and creative people is like, when I was a kid and getting into stuff, you only had access to you had more access than most people did in generations before, but the access people have now to so many different things where it's like ghost story, like creepypastas or horror movies you can watch on Shudder or just torrent or whatever, and like understanding all these different things and concepts in the discussion. They're using that knowledge to their advantage. And I'm not discounting, I'm not acting like that's not original. I think like all filmmakers use the media and the times they grow up in and make their own kind of films and make their own cinema, and that's how they grow up and come up with their ideas and come up with their voice. And these guys, rackaracka or whatever we're calling them, they use that to an amazingly great degree. I think this is a very tight, wonderful kind of mainstream horror film. I quite liked it. The more I think about it, it's been a few days, the more I'm into it, and hearing Del Toro, Spielberg, all these people seem to like it, and the more I'm reading there, I was like, I mean, they do have some points. It was pretty good. I'm actually excited to see it again, but I think it'll definitely make me like scream in my seat and everything like that all over again. But I almost like want to, like, I say that in a joyous way. It's just a very well told kind of film, the kind of horror film that like I wish people would talk about the economy and the smartness of the screenplay and their direction. Unfortunately, I think like that's not usually how things work, but I think there's something to be said that people who can play a tight genre film as well as these guys can, but also make you think of the possibilities of just a parlor game or a party game and all the bad and crazy things you can get up to and complications that you can open up in those sort of things when someone maybe either sees your vulnerability or you're stupid enough to make kind of that one split-second decision. I think it plays on all our vulnerabilities and scares us all at the same time, also giving us a nice little bow of a ghost story to make you feel a little more scared of the dark. So if you've seen Talk to Me and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.